the wrong order, oh my god. Curvy, like I don't know where it's going either. I spent the last 2 months dreaming of, talking about, designing, drafting, creating, sewing, and embroidering my dream wedding dress, and here is how I did it. It was such a joy to get to wear a dress I made myself on my wedding day, and we had such a lovely day. So I hope this video provides sewing, guidance, inspiration, motivation, or helps somebody out who's wanting to do something similar. Enjoy! Editing Jane here. There's going to be a cost breakdown at some point in this video. You can check the timestamps. I didn't do a very good job actually of keeping track of how much this project cost me, but I'm going to do my best to guess, and I'm going to look through my receipts and see if I can find exact numbers. I also can't tell you how much yardage I bought of each of the fabrics, but I'm gonna do my best. I hope that helps, and sorry. Also, I'm gonna chat about my veil in this video, and you can check the timestamps for that as well, because I feel like your veil is basically a part of your dress. Now back to the dress. The first part for any project is, of course, designing it. I spent so many hours thinking about this dress, as any girl thinks about her own wedding dress, I am sure. I thought about different silhouettes, what kind of fabric I would want, whether I wanted it to be cream or white, and the answer was actually neither. I wanted it to be colorful. There are so many parts of the design process that I'm not able to express on video. I made a YouTube video chatting about how I decided on what I decided on for this dress, so you can go check that out if you're super interested in my design process. And I'd love to film more of this in the future, just talk about like how I come to settle on ideas, and I'll phrase it a little bit more eloquently. Let's move on to the next step of the process, which is actually drafting the pattern for the dress. That's a lot more physical, and I'm able to show you a little bit more how I actually created my dress. McCall's 7426 was actually the only pattern that I used in the entirety of my wedding sewing. I just really used this as the jumping off point for creating my own bodice block. So first of all, I did a toile using exactly the pattern and just saw how that fit me. Yeah, it really wasn't great, but first tries rarely are, so I gave it another go. I actually did end up adding a seam under the bust, which was my largest change to the pattern, and instead of having 2 darts under the bust, I actually just made the middle section of the under portion of the bodice a separate piece. Does that make sense? I hope it does. Here's a diagram of all my pattern pieces, if that helps you out just a little bit. The toile process for me is quite simple. I just keep making them until I'm happy. There are always minor adjustments, like taking in the armhole half an inch here, letting it out somewhere else, moving a dart half an inch over, and they're quite simple changes usually, and they just take a little bit of time to really get fixed, especially if you're doing something really tight fitted like I wanted my bodice to be. And here we have it, the toile. I think this is it. I didn't do a toile for the skirt because there was no point. Basically, I knew I wanted a full circle skirt with a width of a waist twice the width of the waist of my bodice, so that it was very gathered and very full. I debated a double circle skirt, but I think that looks a lot better on a heavier fabric, and my fabrication was going to be a polyester Dupioni with 2 layers of tulle on top of it to add some texture and take away a bit of the shine of the polyester. So there was no point doing a toile for the skirt. I moved on to fabric flowers. Let's discuss the fabric flowers for a second, because they would not have been a necessary step for this dress. I just wanted my dress to be covered in flowers. If you didn't want a dress covered in flowers, you wouldn't have to make them. Duh. There is a week of my life I will never get back because I was making these fabric flowers. And I was also defending my thesis this week, so I'm actually glad I had this project to keep me distracted from my stress of my thesis presentation. I also just wanted to chat a little bit about life in general whilst making the wedding dress, because I am so grateful to have had the time to do this and to have been able to do it myself. I didn't have a full-time job at the time that I was making this dress. I was wrapping up my senior year of school at the University of Arkansas, and I studied French, environmental science, and anthropology. And I defended my thesis actually in environmental science. It was on agricultural land abandonment. So school was wrapping up while I was making the wedding dress, but it was also like the most stressful time of school because I had term papers, finals, all of that jazz But I just kind of wanted to explain that because I know people might be wondering, how do you have time to do this? The first step to making these was purchasing a die cutter. A Sizzix Big Shot is what I purchased. It was around $100 from Amazon. And by the way, I'm not including that in the cost of making this dress because that's a piece of hardware that I will use time and time again. Anyway, I also purchased fabric dyes. I also bought these from Amazon. I do not support Amazon. I just don't know where else you would get these, and I was kind of on a time crunch. Anyway, I can link all of the ones that I purchased below if that helps anybody out. And I did just use cotton bed sheets for this project. I purchased some rayon because the fabric dye that I wanted to use was the RIT all-purpose fabric dye, and it doesn't work on polyester. And all of the sheer fabrics that I was able to find were pretty much 100% polyester, organzas and organdies and whatnot. So rayon was the only thing that I found that the fabric dye would actually sink into. I think with the amount of fabric dye I was using, I think it would have been all right to use it on polyester, but I didn't really test it out, so I couldn't speak to that. I also ironed all of these, not individually, but just kind of ran the iron over them once they were done, just to set the dye and also give them a little bit of shape. And people have also asked me, how do I keep these from fraying? I didn't really do much. I sprayed them with starch, and that has kept them together all right. A few of them have frayed, and I really think it's your fabric choice that's going to determine how much they fray, if any. So sorry I don't have much to say about that. I think that cutting across the grain in fabric, the way that all of these are cut with those curved edges and very, very small cuts, actually helps keep them intact. I can't speak to that. I would like to learn more about that. With all of these made, I really had the itch to get started on my dress and start putting them on there because I absolutely love doing any kind of sewing with my hands. It's my absolute favorite. I love to put on a TV show or an audiobook and just sit and sew. So I started on making my actual dress, and this was really, really simple because I had already done so many toiles. I had my pattern pieces, they were marked, I knew exactly what my seam allowance was, so I just cut out my dress with my polyester Dupioni, which I purchased from Fabric Wholesale Direct, and then 2 layers of bridal tulle, which I purchased from Joann's. For each pattern piece, I basted the Dupioni and the 2 layers of tulle together by hand. The most important reason for this was really to reduce any sort of bunching up or gathering that could occur because 3 layers of fabric are going onto a garment all put together in the same position. I wouldn't want the bottom layer to have a little bit of extra space somewhere where the tulle does not have that space because that would lead to bunching and it wouldn't look good. And I'll be honest, at the end of the day, my dress did have some of that. I think that it came from me using 3 layers of fabric, so keep that in mind if you're making this kind of dress. Once I had it all basted together, I did serge the edges of each of these pieces. These seams on this outer layer of fabric were not visible from the inside of my garment because I fully lined my garment, and I'll chat about that in a little bit, but I didn't want any fraying to occur because my Dupioni really did fray. So I serged everything, and then I stitched every pattern piece together with my sewing machine. It doesn't look good right now because it's not lined. It's just a thin little piece of fabric with 2 layers of tulle on top of it, but it will look good once it's lined, and it is quite snug. I like it. With the bodice done, it was finally time to construct the skirt of my wedding dress, the very top bit of the skirt. I did base 2 layers of tulle onto this skirt, and this was by far less perfect than the bodice because I knew that it wouldn't be visible or as visible because the waist of it was so gathered. I gathered this by hand because I just didn't want to chance anything with the sewing machine. I did, however, attach the 2 pieces, the bodice and the skirt, together using the sewing machine naturally, and then I kind of had a wedding dress, a very thin, flimsy wedding dress. The skirt portion of it is huge, and I'm just gonna hem all of that and get all that sorted out. Let me clarify, I did not hem my dress. I actually just serged the entire bottom edge because I hand sewed the hem whenever I was sewing all the flowers and beads on. I'll show that a bit later. But after the dress was totally put together, I realized that I didn't want to sew back beads and flowers onto the bodice as was. It needed a little bit of extra support to hold the weight of all the beads. So I added a lining made out of cotton bed sheets. And this isn't the lining for the dress. It was basically just an extra layer for the bodice. The very last step to the outer shell of the dress was attaching this lining that I made for the bodice into the actual dress, and I didn't do any sewing at this present moment because I just pinned it in, and I figured I would just attach it whenever I put all the beads and flowers in. One of the benefits of adding a full lining at a later step is that the beading and flower work would not be showing from the inside of the garment. That was the very last bit for the outer shell. For the bottommost layer, we'll start with that. We'll do 10 inches by 210, 10 by 160, 10 by 180, 8 by 210, 8 by 160, and 8 by 180. And I have assigned colors for all of those, so I'm just gonna cut those out. And then I'll gather each of those individually because they're all gonna be different lengths. And then I'll sew all of those together and then I'll attach them to the skirt. That's the plan. And then we'll do the same thing for every single layer and it should be good. And I will stop and chat whenever complications arise, which they no doubt will. I am questioning if this is perhaps too much. I don't know if you could have too big of a skirt for a wedding dress, but this is quite large. Before starting construction, I figured out all of my materials. I knew that I wanted to use a rainbow of tulle, and this is what I purchased from thetoolshop.com. I got dark pink, light purple, light blue, light pink, a white, and then a cream. And I bought 2 rolls of each of the white and the cream. Each of these rolls is around 50 yards, and it's 54-inch wide fabric. My next material was tulle netting. I believe I purchased 3 or 4 yards of this. I had a little bit of excess, but I did need enough for a half circle skirt. This was not a full circle skirt. And this was because this actually served as the base for my petticoat, the base on which I put all of my other regular quality tulle onto. I followed a Frida Leopold petticoat tutorial, which I have linked below. It's very helpful, and essentially I just drew lines going perpendicularly down the skirt. Let me draw a diagram of the lines that I drew. And then I attached my tulle rows onto these lines. I did 6 pieces of tulle for each of my rows. They were different heights as well as different lengths, different widths, different heights, whatever. They were all different so that I could maximize fluffiness, because I think if tulle is different lengths of gather and then different widths or heights or whatever you want to call it, it won't sit right on the next layer of tulle and it helps increase the poofiness of the petticoat. It was easiest for me to sew the 6 layers of tulle together. I gathered them all individually because they were all different lengths of gather, but then I put them all together and then I attached them in just one big chunk onto each row of the petticoat. So there were only 4 rows essentially, and obviously the height or width of each row got longer the higher up on the petticoat I went, because the bottom was the shortest and closest to the ground. And I didn't cut these super particularly because I knew I was going to give the petticoat a haircut after it was assembled. Also, you may have noticed that this is currently not a circular shape, it's a half circle, and there are 2 sides to it. I did not close those up until the very end of this project, and I can't even express how challenging that was. This is what I have so far, and I'm not gonna lie, I'm kind of confused. I also am hesitant to share this process online because I know someone's gonna tell me I'm doing it wrong. I know I'm probably doing this wrong. I have done my research. I'm not saying you should do this too if you're trying to put together a 24-layer petticoat, but we'll see if it works for me. I essentially just had to line up each of the layers and sew them together, and I'm not gonna lie, I cheated on a couple, but I think doing this is the only way to really understand how to close up the back. And obviously I left a 6-inch gap at the very top of the petticoat for the zipper in my dress. But before attaching everything together, I actually made 10 circular layers of tulle to go on top of my petticoat because it needed some circles. Obviously so far it had just been rectangles, and those are great for adding gather and volume, but the circle was the shape that I wanted for my actual garment. These were the exact same as the shape of the skirt of the outer layer of my dress. Oh, that was a mouthful. This room is starting to feel a little bit small to be making a petticoat of this size. It started feeling that way a while ago, but I've just now thought about it a little bit more. Also, this magenta tulle that I'm using, that I've been using, is like looking at the world through rose-colored glasses. It's beautiful. I kind of want to just like make myself a large shapeless garment out of it and just wear it over all of my clothes and always be wearing this pink tulle because it's lovely. It's really lovely. All right, we've done 3 of the full circle layers. I have to cut out 2 for each of the layers and then sew them together with a French seam so that it's invisible. I don't know if that's actually invisible in French, but I have 3 done and I have 7 more to go. Look at all my layers of tulle. It's all cut out, sewn together. I just need to put it together. This is about to be a petticoat. We're so close and this is incredible. One of my friends told me that they thought my room was on fire when I posted a little picture of this on my Instagram story, and that kind of made me laugh. Let's put all of this together. I don't know if I can get this on my desk, but I'm gonna try. Before attaching my circular layers to my actual petticoat, I just attached them all to each other, and this was some pretty nitpicky sewing. It just was very hard to make sure they were all perfectly lined up. and I did my best. I just find tulle kind of enraging sometimes. You gotta be in the right mindset to want to deal with it. It is officially time to put this onto here. Boom, they're about to be combined and they're about to be crazy. And I have hope, this is right now like overwhelmingly large. I have hope that if I gave it a good steam and really like took maybe an hour to pull out each row and get it to lie flat, it won't be quite as big. But if it is this big, that's okay. As long as my dress is not like pancake tutu level of fluffy, I'm sure it'll be fine. Oh boy, that's insane. I'm a little embarrassed by how much time I spent amusing myself standing this thing up and just letting it stand because it stood on its own. The tulle netting really helped with that, but as you can see, the back side of this really kind of shows where I put all of the tulle on. Anyway, I took a break from the petticoat. I needed a break, and I actually started the embroidery of the dress. I spent a few months collecting beads for this project, and it was finally time to use them. I slowly worked on beading my bodice. I focused on putting flowers near the shoulders and waist seams and just doing beads over the rest of it. Part of this was because I did not like the look of my fabric, but I also am just totally in love with sewing things onto garments by hand. My dad and I actually took a trip to Colorado right in the midst of the embroidery work on this dress, so I took my dress with me and it miraculously did not get dirty. We went camping, and so the dress was in my tent with me, and I just worked on it at night by headlamp. It was quite fun, and my wedding dress is honestly very well traveled. I have here a half circle skirt with the waist equaling the waist of the bodice of my dress, not a full circle skirt, and a lining piece which is just my bodice pattern pieces cut out. This thing's sewed together and pressed and ready to go. I did this a few weeks ago, but I just didn't feel like filming it because I've now made this pattern probably about 15 times, which is probably how it goes for everybody making a wedding dress, but I was just so sick of it. So I didn't film making this, maybe a few clips, but yeah. I think the reason that I spent so long embroidering the dress was partially because I did not want to put the back side of everything together. It actually wasn't bad at all having done it, but I really wasn't looking forward to it, and mostly that petticoat. At the end of the day, the petticoat was 28 layers. It was 6 layers of tulle on each of my rows. I didn't end up doing the top row because I didn't want that much gather at the waist. By the way, if you remember this dress, the Audrey Hepburn dress that she wears in Funny Face, designed by Givenchy, that dress has a lot more gather at the waist, so I think if I did end up adding more tulle at the top of the petticoat, my dress would be a little bit more accurate to that dress. But I didn't end up doing that, so I also had 10 circular layers on the top of the petticoat, and I closed up the back of the wedding dress first. I prefer to sew back seams together up until the point where my zipper goes to, and then add the zipper. That's a personal preference, and I know that technically you're supposed to put a zipper in before you finish up the rest of the seam. We have a successful zipper where everything lines up perfectly. That took a couple tries, but we have it. Voila! This is my first time seeing the back of the dress actually kind of look like a back of a dress, which is exciting. So yes, now we have to begin the process of getting the petticoat and the lining assembled at their back seams, and I don't have enough patience for this right now, so I'm gonna go get a coffee and then I'll have enough patience to tackle this problem. Basically, the whole project would be easier if the petticoat just went underneath everything, because that would take me like 2 seconds to put a waistband on that petticoat, put a zipper in there, have it just sit underneath, but I really want it to be right underneath this outer shell of the dress because that's gonna add to the look of it a whole lot, and then I want the lining underneath it because I don't want all that tulle touching my legs during the wedding. So I'm gonna do it my way, even though it would have been easier to do it another way. It is a large and it is 3 p.m., but we have a busy couple days ahead. The zipper went about 6 inches down from the seam between the bodice and the skirt, so I attached all my other pieces up until that point, 6 inches below the seam, the top seam of the skirt. Once I had the lining skirt closed up, I actually put the petticoat on top of it, making sure that the front of my seams, i.e. the nice side of the seams, was facing the inside and not the outside, because I wanted the inside of the garment to have no raw edges. In this clip, I was pondering how to put the zipper onto the petticoat without getting the tulle of the petticoat caught up in the zipper, because the tulle is technically closer to the zipper than the lining. Anyway, I decided to put 2 6-inch strips of fabric, essentially 2 binding strips, around the petticoat. I don't think I got any good clips of this, but this helped keep the tulle out of the way as I attached the zipper to that piece, which I already attached the zipper to the outside of the dress, but I was also going to sew it onto the inside so that essentially it was invisible. I'll show you a close-up at the very end whenever I show you the dress. Then I attached the bodice of the lining to the skirt, which was now attached to the petticoat, right sides together, so I put both lining pieces together because the petticoat was essentially going to be sandwiched in between the lining and the outer shell of the dress. We have a lining. It's very exciting. It feels very much like something I'd wear to a recital if I was 5 years old and doing ballet, but in a good way. It's kind of weird to see something like this adult-sized. Do you know what I mean? It's just so little girl ballerina-esque. But now that I have this done and I'm about to put it on the dress, it means it's my very last opportunity to work on the wedding dress without it being a total pain. But I think I'm ready to put it together. The skirt's just gonna be really hard to work on, but that's okay. This dress is about to become huge. While I sew these together, I'm going to keep this one on the outside. So I'll put this one on the inside with the outside facing out. That was a whole lot of confusing words, but it'll make sense. With the outside facing out, so that we have right sides together. Wait a second. Wait, I'm wrong. What? The order of this is wrong because the tulle needs to be on the other side. Because right now, the tulle would go underneath. No. Wait, no, I was correct, but I'm not sure how. I need to put it together and then we'll see if I'm right or wrong. I think I'm correct. I'm confused because this is like right now we have all of the finished seams are facing inside. So I would essentially wear the lining like this and we have the tulle petticoat on the outside. So I have to be correct. I'm just confused how this is going to be sewn together. I'll just stuff that in there. This is kind of confusing, so bear with me. So first I pull out this. How do I turn this inside out again? I have forgotten. Yeah. I pull it through here. Just the skirt though. And there should be a lining inside of this. Fingers crossed, please be inside of here. I think it is. This is so crazy. Oh my goodness. It's correct. Ah! I'm so excited. Oh my goodness. Let me fix all this. This was the most complete the dress became before I stopped filming, so let's move on to the veil. So yesterday was probably the first day I gave any serious consideration to wearing a veil or not. My friend asked me, "Are you wearing one?" And I said, I have no idea. And then I realized, of course I'm wearing one. I actually purchased a pack of headbands online. They were like $3 and I have a whole lot of colors. I might save pink because I like pink, but I don't think I'll ever be wearing emerald green. So my plan is to actually just sew fabric onto this. It fits me pretty well. It's just a little bit flimsy, but I don't think that matters. And then I have a little bit of bridal tulle left over. I would say I have about 2 yards left of this, and I don't know how full I want my veil to be. And I also don't know if a veil is supposed to be cut in a specific shape. I was personally thinking that I would just use the width of this fabric, which looks like it's 54 inches, and I would just gather it and then sew it onto the headband as follows, and maybe do 2 or 3 layers. So it would be a pretty full veil, and I'm also thinking that I will go like, that's the longest I would go, would be mid-back. I'm probably gonna go a little bit shorter. But anyway, I think I'm just gonna sew it onto this headband, have it be totally attached to this so that I just put the whole thing on. I'm gonna start by sewing a base layer of this white fabric, which just was cuttings from another project, onto here. That's not the color white that I'm using for my project, but it will be good to just cover up all the green before I attach everything else. If I was going to do this project again, I would probably trace out my headband onto a piece of paper, make a little pattern, make a sleeve for the headband, and then just slide it into the fabric, but I didn't do that. I just cut a strip a little bit wider than twice the width of my headband, and I sewed it together with a slip stitch. It didn't look great, but it also didn't matter because I covered it with about 4 layers of tulle and then a bunch of beads and flowers. You get the gist. Always adding beads and flowers to everything. I can't tell if I actually don't like this color scheme that I have been using for my whole dress and headband at this point, or if I've spent too long looking at it, and I'm hoping that I've just spent too long looking at it because it's just Easter. It is just pastels and a few hot pinks and like lime yellows. But besides that, it's very pastel, although it's a wedding. So I think I'm done with the headband. I'm just going to decide which side is the front and then add on my veil. And then I will spend a lot of time embroidering the veil, but I think the headband's quite pretty. Wow, it's all feeling so real. I'm getting married. Okay, I think that's good. It's odd. It looks odd because I've never had a piece of tulle on the back of my head before, but I think it's pretty good. I don't have anything sewn together. I even still have my needle in here from gathering it because I wasn't sure if I want it to go all the way down to the edge of the headband. I think right now it's just in the middle. Yeah, I think I'm gonna keep it as gathered as it is and not go all the way to the edge of the headband. I don't really know what I'm doing, but there's no reason to stress quite yet. I got my needle stuck in the tulle. Before I show you the final dress and veil, let's talk about how much this all cost me. Shall we talk about the budget for this project? How much it cost me to make my own wedding dress. Also, if you're watching this video, you're getting a total sneak peek into my next project, which has actually been turning a part of my husband's garage into my sewing studio. It's been a project. Everything has taken longer than I thought that it would take. And you're actually seeing also an unfinished mural that I've been working on behind me. But enough of that. I'll post a video about that in a couple weeks, I think, is what's on the schedule. Anyway, the cost of this dress. So my first expense was really hard to quantify, and that was beads. I've been buying beads for a couple months, as I said, and I would say I actually spent around $200 on beads for this dress. And I have a lot left over, but in order to get the variation that I wanted, I had to buy a lot of beads. I didn't have to, but it was my pleasure to buy a lot of beads. While that might seem like a lot, it's not as much as it could have cost. I used a lot of plastic beads, a couple of glass beads, which are always more expensive, and a lot of like secondhand beads that I just found at thrift stores and whatnot. So that was the cost for the beads of the dress. And then my next big cost was actually the fabric for my wedding dress, the polyester Dupioni that I used. For 7 yards of that fabric, it was $44.92. However, I also purchased samples from Fabric Wholesale Direct in order to figure out what fabric I wanted, and those cost $10. They were $1 a piece and I got 10 of them. And let's throw in $5 for shipping. I can't find the receipt for that. But we're at $60 for wedding dress fabric. Next, I bought tulle, a lot of it. For all of the tulle that I used in this dress, which was pretty much 8 bolts of 40 yards with 54-inch wide from tulleshop.com, it was $60.89 for the tulle, but shipping was $23.50, so my total order was $84.39. Now, I don't have receipts for the next couple of things, but I did buy lining from Joann's, and I don't even remember which kind I bought. It was polyester. I think I bought 3 yards of, no, definitely not. I think I bought 5 yards of lining. We'll call it $7 a yard. We'll call it $10 a yard, $50 for lining. And then I bought tulle netting. Now this was cheap. I think it was $5 a yard. And we'll also say I bought 5 yards of that. So we're at $25 plus 50, $75 for fabric from Joann's. I did buy Rit all-purpose dye. I got 6 of those. They were around $2 each. And I think my total for that purchase came up to $21. That was from Hobby Lobby. I also purchased 3 yards of rayon fabric from Joann's, and it was on sale. It was on clearance or something, but it cost me around $25 to get all of that. I didn't end up using all of that. I actually hated the way rayon frayed. I was going to use it all for my fabric flowers, but I used a lot of thrifted bed sheets for those. So those were pretty much free. I already had them. That brings our total for this dress to $439.39. We'll call it $450. That's actually more expensive than I thought. Okay, well, hopefully I don't have any more super expensive projects like that in the future. And now, the moment you're all waiting for, let me go get my wedding dress so I can show it to you, so I can spin around, show you all the details, and yeah. So much everybody for listening to me talk about this wedding dress for so long. For months. I'm done, I promise. I have so much more exciting stuff coming up. I am in the midst of working on this sewing studio right now. It's a tremendously huge mess. I have not unpacked anything. I'm just trying to get all my like building, decorating projects done before I put all my fabric in place. Anyway, thanks for watching. You can find me on social media, a bunch of different social medias. I'll link all that below. Let me know what you're working on. I would love to know.